I want to bring on today's guest now, Adam Goldstein. He's the co-founder of Archer Aviation. If it sounds familiar, it should. We talked about this literally 24 hours ago. You shouldn't have forgotten by now. They're merging with Atlas Crest Investment, tickers ACIC. I'm going to bring him on now. Adam, good morning. Welcome to SPAX Attack.
Hey, good morning. Good to be on the show.
Thanks for coming on with us. So let's just start with like the same question we ask everyone that are most companies that come on our show is why go the SPAC route?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. And if I just take a step back here for a second, just to sort of kind of set the stage. So we are designing and developing electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. And these are vehicles that are designed for urban air mobility. And so you get this like big step change in technology when you take these vehicles and you go electric. So I just want to kind of set the stage and help you understand and frame like what's happening here. So there's no actual new like science breakthrough that we're waiting for. There's no regulatory changes that we're waiting for. It's actually a fairly simple story, right? You have these vehicles called helicopters, which everybody knows are very expensive, very loud, and in some cases can be dangerous. They're not as safe as they necessarily could be. And so when you go electric, you get this huge advantage here, where the big advantage is batteries are now dense enough to put these into vehicles, and you can take these motors and rotors and shrink them way down. So electric motors scale down efficiently instead of these big combustion engines that don't scale down efficiently. And when you do that, you have these really redundant vehicles. So a helicopter will have something like 200 to 300 critical parts. That means if any of those parts fail, you can have a catastrophic incident. So that's why helicopters can be dangerous. And so with electric, you get 0 single points of failure in these vehicles, 0. So they're super redundant, super safe vehicles. The second thing happens when you can shrink the rotors and the motors down, you also can change the noise profile. So you're not having that deep wop wop sound like a helicopter generates. That's hugely important. So if you think that the helicopter industry, the vertical takeoff landing industry was to scale, it's really challenging just because they're super loud vehicles. So even if it wasn't expensive, people did want to take them and they were safe, still can't do it because of noise issues. So now when you go electric, you also get the noise benefit here too. You can do a lot of things to change the shape of those rotors and motors to help make the sound significantly quieter. And then because they're electric, you can also utilize these vehicles really heavily. And so you can bring the cost down to something significant. Now, in order to do all that, big hardware projects, and you're seeing it across kind of a lot of these different hardware companies, it's obviously very capital intensive to do that. And so we think it'll take somewhere between $600 and $700 million to get to market. $600, $700 million to be able to build out this company, get to free cash flow break even. So what a typical startup or venture-backed company would do is they'd go and they raise 50 million, then 100 million, then 200 million, then 300 million. But this amazing thing happened where the world recognized, wow, it's a really important time right now to be focused on these EV companies, to be focused on decarbonization. And that, wow, the future is moving towards electrification of transport. And so I feel incredibly lucky that the market has recognized that. And so what we were able to do with this SPAC transaction, and directly answering your question, is raise all the capital we need to get to market in one swoop. And that is incredible. It's great for our investors. It allows us to be able to focus on actually building the industry and not just capital raising all the time. So a huge advantage for the EV companies, and I think will help really bring the electrification of transportation, not just in the air, but into all forms of transportation.
Perfect. So I want to back up a little bit too. And I know you're a co-founder, co-CEO of this company. Can you give us a little bit of background on your history in the space and some of the other members of the management team?
Yeah, absolutely. So my business partner and I, Brett, have been working together for a long time, over 10 years. We're best friends, we're business partners, we vacation together, we're basically family at this point. And so Brett and I have built, I don't know, maybe a dozen companies together, mostly in the software space. And so we're entrepreneurs and problem solvers. We like going out and tackling really big problems. Our last business was a software company based in New York. It was called Vettery. Awesome mission-driven company. We scaled up hundreds of people and ultimately sold that company to a large European company. And then after that, we immediately started building airplanes together. And so we had this big view, this big vision on electrification of transport. Brett and I are very big Elon Musk enthusiasts. We believe in what he's doing is really helpful in pushing the world towards this sustainable form of transportation. So we're investors in Tesla, we're investors in SpaceX. We love the whole industry. And so one of the things we did was we went down to the University of Florida, where both of us went to school. and we donated a bunch of money to the school, and we built an eVTOL lab, so an electric vertical takeoff and landing lab, where it was used to be studied the space. And I think it's really important that we help do our part in pushing these, in pushing this industry, as quickly as possible. At the same time, we've been following. There was a group that started the industry about 10 years ago. So Larry Page basically invents the industry 10 years ago with a company that was originally called Z-Aero. You might know it now called Whisk. Whisk is the name that they took after they did the big joint venture with Boeing. So Larry Page spent, I don't know, it's not publicly disclosed, I'm guessing maybe something like $1 billion of capital over 10 years, building 5 full-scale aircraft and dozens of those aircraft. The latest one is called Cora. That's the one you can see on the whisk.aero website. Incredible group with incredible technology. Now, a lot of the folks from Archer came from Whisk. So Tom Muniz, our head of engineering, ran engineering at Whisk. Jeff Bauer was an early employee at Whisk as well, but he left around 5 years ago or so to go run Airbus's program called Airbus Vahana. And so he was the chief engineer there. So Jeff and Tom came back together. And then when those guys came together, it was this huge moment in eVTOL industry. The two leaders of two of the biggest projects out there, Whisk and Airbus, got together to come, and a lot of engineers followed them, and a lot of engineers wanted to come over and work with them again. These are two of the most technically competent people, the longest standing people that have been working on this industry. And so this is the 6th aircraft that they're building, 6th full-scale aircraft. So it's not a question to us of whether the technology works. You can literally just go to a Whisk website, or go on YouTube and type in Airbus Vahana, or same thing with Joby. You can see these vehicles work. And so now you're at the point where you need to get to certification. And so what Archer did was Archer designed a vehicle that was designed from day one alongside the regulators. We said, okay, let's build a vehicle that can get the performance needed for urban air mobility, which we think is 60 miles at the end of battery life, which also includes reserves. How do you build that vehicle as simple as possible so it can get certified and also be mass manufactured? And then we said, okay, great. Now we have the design that makes sense. This is the design that Tom and Jeff think is the winning design in the industry. We went and said, okay, we're going to need to think about mass manufacturing, right? From the very beginning. We don't want to just build 100 of these vehicles. We want to think long-term, 20, 30, 50 years. How do you build lots of these vehicles? And so we partnered with Stellantis. Stellantis is the merger between Fiat Chrysler and Peugeot. And so they have been working on mass manufacturing for obviously a very long time. They have the competencies in robotic automation and thinking through how do you take something from a concept all the way through production. And then the second stage of what we did is we said, okay, what about on the certification, operations, maintenance side, like the real business side of things? Who would be the absolute best partner who also really cares about decarbonization? And that was United Airlines. And so we had this really culmination of two groups that wants to bring this industry to market as quickly as possible. They can reduce our timeline. They provide financial support. They help also provide a lot of, I think, really consumer confidence, right? Because we'll need consumer adoption. And so, again, all we're really doing here is seeing this replacement cycle of helicopters happen to way safer, way cheaper, way quieter vehicles. And then the TAM will expand. The total addressable market will expand. And the reason why it will expand, so like I'll ask you, Chris, when's the last time you've taken a helicopter?
A long time ago.
You'll tell me once or never. That's what everyone says, right? And so everyone says, yeah, one time, or I don't know, a long time ago.
One time.
So exactly, it's very, very common. Or everyone says, yeah, on my honeymoon in Hawaii or something like that. So if it was $50 to go from Manhattan to JFK, right, instead of sitting 90 minutes in traffic, and it was safe, would you consider that? And I think the answer to most people is, of course, if I can fly to the airport in 5 minutes instead of sitting in traffic for 90 minutes, yeah, that sounds interesting. So if you replace helicopters, right, which is there's 10 to 15,000 in the US or something like 40,000 worldwide. That's think about 40,000 times $5 million, huge market. You got to replace all those with these new, safer, quieter, cheaper vehicles. And then guys like you, Chris, that's what we're saying. Hey, here's a vehicle that may have a large airline brand on the side of it that makes you feel comfortable, that has been certified by the FAA, by the way, certified at the same level of a commercial airliner, which is 10 to the -9, which means there won't be an incident 1 in a billion flight hours. And would you take it? And I think my guess is you will, and the market will expand. Now, one last comment here, timeline. So if you look at the numbers we put out there, a lot of people step back and say, when are there going to be thousands of these vehicles flying overhead? That's really scary. Well, if you look at the numbers we put out there, our 2026 number from vehicle production is 500 vehicles. It's not that crazy. Yes, it's about $2 billion in revenue. And if you look at our later half of the decade numbers, you'll see we get up to, 800, 1,000 vehicles. Those are the types of numbers that aerospace companies build all the time right now. This is not crazy. We have to first go through and replace all the helicopters in the United States and in the world, and then expand the TAM, expand the total addressable market to new folks. And so I think it really will bring in folks, but you're not going to see thousands of vehicles flying overhead like in this decade. That's not going to happen. But that could happen, 2030, 2040, 2050. And that's where we're all working towards. But you can still build huge businesses all along the way. $10 billion run rate businesses, in this decade along the way, just by taking out fractions or, double-digit percentages out of the helicopter market.
Adam, I got to say, as you respond to some of these questions, you knock out more and more of the questions I have with some of these answers. So, great responses here, getting a lot of information. So I know you talked about being built with that FAA certification in mind from the start. That was a big highlight for me from the presentation. I guess I would ask then, with that aside, what are the biggest hurdles standing in Archer's way right now?
Yeah, good question. So historically, if you would have asked me that, my answer would have been capital. How are we going to raise $1 billion of capital? Man, that's hard. That's a slog. That's a lot of stuff. Now, with the focus of the world on EVs, that risk is taken off the table. And so the new kind of focus moves to two things. It's always really been around certification and manufacturing, but now it's two instead of three, meaning capital is no longer. Now it's cert and manufacturing. So the vehicle is designed day one with cert in mind. I think there's a really awesome video, Chris. I'll send it to you after the show. There's a very senior person at the FAA named Jay Merkel. And he gets on C-SPAN 3. I'm not sure if you watched C-SPAN 3, Chris. Maybe you missed it. But Jay Merkel got on, it was about 6 months ago. And he said, number one question I get asked, is this real? Is this happening? And he says, yes, this is more than just promotional marketing videos. We have at least 6 companies that are 6 vehicles that are well along their way in type certification. This is not just something that we're just talking about. We are working on the operations. We are working on how to integrate these vehicles into the airspace. And so the FAA is very far along in doing this. This is not like some surprise, there's vehicles. We're literally like shouting at rooftops, it's happening, guys, it's happening, right? And it's just more of like understanding when these vehicles will get the adoption as soon as we get through certification. Now, the next big challenge is mass manufacturing, right? So if you look at today, a Boeing, for example, will produce something like 1,000 vehicles. And you go down kind of to the smaller, companies, the smaller aircraft companies like a Piper or a Cessna or like a Cirrus Vision Jet, right? They're producing hundreds of vehicles. So we know that's possible. We know we can do that. Now the question is, how do we build 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 vehicles per year? Now, if you look at our financial estimates in our deck, you can see we do not project we are going to be doing that 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 in our financial numbers. But we're certainly working on it. We're certainly trying to figure out how to do mass manufacturing. That is a really big one. And we haven't really mass manufactured aircraft since World War II. And so I don't think that it's not possible to do it. I think there hasn't been demand for it before to do it. And that's why it hasn't happened. But now with electric, you have these vehicles that are safe, quiet, and less expensive. I think the demand is going to be huge. So now it's turning that back on. So, it's not like we're out there saying we're going to produce 500,000 vehicles. What took Tesla 18 years to do, we're going to do it in 3, like some of these EV companies are doing. We're not doing that. We're saying we're going to produce 500 vehicles by 2026. That is a feat that I think is possible. So manufacturing, first, we'll call at the traditional aerospace level is what we're focused on today, while at the same time in parallel, working with a group like Stellantis to think about mass manufacturing. How do we set up a factory to be able to produce 5,000, 10,000, 20,000? That's the focus. That's a big challenge. That's what takes us to build this next $1 trillion industry, $3 trillion industry, as Morgan Stanley states. So one last comment here too. It is my view that very few companies will reach escape velocity, right? You need to raise a lot of capital. There's a lot of technical expertise. And then ultimately you have to execute on building these vehicles. So our team, which has the deepest technical knowledge out of any other group in the industry, I think has the ability to get there. I'm not sure that's true for a lot of the new companies that will come on. But I feel very confident we will reach that escape velocity and get there. We have the capital, we've got the team, we've got the partners, and now it's up to us to execute.
Perfect. So the other big news that dropped yesterday, along with the SPAC merger announcement, was the partnership with United. So United invested in the PIPE. They also committed to buying $1 billion worth of aircraft from Archer and a possible order of 500 million additional. Can you talk a little bit about United, that partnership, and how this agreement came to be and what the timeline of that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So last year, United Airlines made a pledge to make a significant impact on the environment they want to embrace emerging technologies. And so the company recognizes the positive impact that urban air mobility can have on the environment. And so that vision that Scott Kirby at United has aligns perfectly with the vision that Archer has. And so United ordered aircraft, but it wasn't just an order, it was a partnership. And so this partnership was really designed around how do we help bring this future to a reality as quick as possible. And so we are aligned in that they're helping us get to market. They're helping us with things like certification. They're helping us with things like maintenance and operations. Think about it, right? So we're not just an R&D shop building cool technology. We have to think about things like, how do you maintenance a battery on a plane, right? Guess who's done that before? 787s, 737s, they have lithium-ion batteries today on vehicles. They've been maintaining those vehicles for a long time. They have very good clarity in terms of how to operate vehicles in the airspace, on the ground, and how to attract customers and how to do all this safely. And so it's a huge partnership for us in terms of thinking about getting to market quickly. I think it's also a big boost of confidence to early adopters of the product, to the mass adopters of the product eventually, that, hey, United Airlines thinks Archer is the company that can build safe vehicles that can get to market the quickest, that'll be certified first. That may be a vehicle that I want to get onto. And so, Chris, I'm hopeful that when these vehicles are offered at $50 and we can take you from JFK to Manhattan, you'll be one of the first ones online there. And hopefully partnerships like United and future ones that we'll work on will attract you to taking these vehicles. And you won't just say, yeah, I did it once a long time ago, I don't really remember. You'll say, oh yeah, I did it last week. Oh yeah, I was in Manhattan and I wanted to go out to Connecticut and go to Colony Pizza and because I love that place, it's great, and then come right back. And by the way, I can do that on Tuesday and still get home and see the kids, no problem. And it costs me the same as an Uber. That's a pretty cool thing. That's the future I want to live in.
Yeah, definitely. You let me know. Yeah, I will be more than happy to come share a ride in one of these great vehicles that you have coming. One of the questions we got in the chat was on that United deal. So the question is, are those orders or is this just a pending deal going forward?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So we've signed a definitive agreement. It's a purchase order, but we obviously have to deliver aircraft that have certain performance capabilities. So like, for example, if we delivered an aircraft that only went 5 miles, it doesn't have a lot of use to them. And so United went out and diligenced the whole industry. They looked at everybody. There's a bunch of wingless groups out there. So folks that are building wingless planes, there are folks that are building different types of vehicles. And what was really important to them was we have to pick the winner. Right. And so we can't pick the number 2, number 3. We can't get this wrong. Right. We need to bring, the decarbonization effort to the air as fast as possible. It's a big part of Scott Kirby's mission. And so it was important that we have that. And so we said, let's structure the contract to make sure that you feel comfortable that we'll do that. And so we put in there the ability, for us to have to meet certain performance metrics. Now, this is the 6th plane that our team has built. And so if you look back at history from Tom Muniz and Jeff Bauer, the chief engineer and our VP of engineering, we feel highly confident we can deliver that. That's something we're very willing, to take a bet on. And so, there's other things that we need to think through as partners, right? So United made also, an investment in the company. And when doing that too, we talked about things like, geography, right? So we're going to deliver planes to you, and Archer wants to operate planes too. We're going to do that together. So how do we think about like kind of carving up, the world, right? So again, it's only 200 planes. We're not talking about, think about that in context of helicopters or 10, 15,000 helicopters, like just in the US, right? So it's a small percentage of the world of the country that we're talking about. but we want to operate. We think can launch a business and be more productive together than separate. And so our thought was, okay, there's a bunch of details like that, geographic restrictions that will work out as partners along the way.
Perfect. So I know we've got more questions flying in the chat. I want to get through a couple more I have here, but the chat is going crazy right now for Archer. They love you, Adam. They want to know more and more about this company. So let's try to fly through some more questions. So, you talk about that kind of Uber for Air model as one of the two business segments. My question is, so if I want to book an Uber, I go on the app, I, pick the city I want to go to, the place and everything. Is that something Archer will control? Will you have the technology and the infrastructure for the ride share, or will you look to partner with a company on that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So Archer will definitely build the consumer facing experience, right? My background is in software too. I'm excited for that part of the business. I think we can do a great job creating an awesome brand that attracts really great, folks to the platform. I do think there is also the ability to partner with other great folks. So meaning like take an Uber or a Lyft or some of these other rideshare or multimodal kind of groups. They want, it's part of the chain. So if you think about, if you're going to book a ride, if you're going to book a flight to go from, let's say, JFK to LAX, right? And so you think about that full trip, right? So what you'll likely do is you'll book that trip, but then there's also two other legs of that trip, which is, taking your, as an example, Waymo, you're taking your Waymo, taxi to the vertiport. You're taking the Archer aircraft from the vertiport to JFK, and then you take, the United, plane from United to LAX, right? So if you think about like the multimodal group, I think there's a lot of groups that have already like reached out and indicated they wanted to work with us. So Waymo is a really interesting one that, I bring that up simply because Waymo has a really deep relationship with Stellantis. And so, that would be a group that we would be really interested to work with as a multimodal partner. They're one of the leaders in autonomy out there. And so I think that's like a good, hopefully user journey that you can understand moving from, booking the entire trip all through one app, by the way. So if you think about like, how do we sort of piece all that together? We're working with different groups right now to try to, solve those issues. But I do think that will start with the Archer consumer experience.
Perfect. So that rideshare business, looking at, dense cities first, you mentioned New York City. How many cities are we looking at to start? And how many of these, highly populated cities do you see in the future in Archer?
Yeah, so we use New York as an example because a lot of people have taken that, New York to, JFK to Manhattan taxi, which is, I think like it's a killer, right? It's only 17 miles and takes you 90 minutes. I lived in New York for 20 years. I've missed flights planning for 90 minutes to go 17 miles. That's a good example, but New York is very real estate constrained. So it's not likely the first city that we'd launch into, although it is a very big helicopter city. If you look at cities like LA, Miami, Orlando, Dallas, those cities are very pro urban air mobility. They want this technology to happen. Those cities want to be technology leaders. They also have a decent amount of existing infrastructure. So take LA, over 200 helipads, 12 underutilized airports, and then you can also build retrofitted, parking structures into landing areas, right? So these vehicles weigh 6,000 pounds and they create minimal downwash, which means the air being blown down when these vehicles take off and land. It won't damage the infrastructure. And so you can actually put these vertiports in a lot of different places, but LA would be a really good typical city. We've been talking to the city, and then several other cities too. We will likely start with some of these core cities. It's obviously easier, to start in a city like LA that has great weather all year round. But the vehicles are certainly built for all weather capabilities. This is a global thing though. This isn't just a thing that will, happen in, just a few cities. This is a concept that really will be everywhere. A lot of the investors in our PIPE process are global investors, strategic global investors that have interests in bringing these capabilities to their countries. And so this is a movement, to take mankind and move them into the air. This is not just about reducing traffic from JFK to Manhattan. That's the good obvious example. But what about, you know, living in in LA and going out to Palm Springs, you know, for lunch, or probably to start, I'll call it Riverside, right? Something that's a little bit closer. It's a little further of a trip. Probably in 5 years, batteries will be good enough to do the full LA to Palm Springs trip. But, you know, how about being in LA and just going to Malibu for dinner and back and not fighting traffic, right? Or just, you know, I live in the Bay Area and I want to go, you know, we do a lot of biking here. I want to go out to the Santa Cruz Mountains. Instead of, you know, going out there, how about just flying out there, right? It's really about reconnecting, you know, with the earth, with these trips that would typically be, you know, saved for vacations or holidays or weekends. You can now do them on an everyday basis, right? That's what makes us like super excited long-term, the vision here around this. People are just stuck in traffic and they don't want to be. It's not that when transportation has improved, it's not that people necessarily traveled longer. It's that they just traveled further. There's only so much tolerance people will like sit in a car for. This allows you to really start expanding and really kind of getting back out there, which is what makes us so exciting. And by the way, which is why we think the market will ultimately be so big for this.
Perfect. So I'll say, you know, as you were talking about cities, the chat was letting us know what they want you to come to, because I think everyone wants you to come to, you know, the cities that they live in so they can get a ride on this. So lots of excitement. I have one more question before we get to chat questions again. The chat is going crazy and just wants to know everything about Archer. What's the timeline on the prototype? I see in the presentation 2021. I know you can't give me a date, any sort of hint of what quarter or when we could get the unveiling of this vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a secret, by the way. So the vehicle is in its final assembly in our lab right now. So, you know, we could gladly have you over and come see the vehicle. We will do the unveiling as soon as the transaction is complete and we are able to do marketing again. So that's targeted in May, where we'll go out there and we will hold a big media event, you know, a Tesla Cybertruck style event. You know, we actually hired the person that runs that ran the Tesla Cybertruck event. We thought that event was awesome, really, really cool. We want to do a big event and have people come sit in the vehicle, see the vehicle. And then, you know, afterwards, ultimately, you know, we'll do all the flight tests for everyone to see. We are going to be a very transparent company. We have a lot of confidence in our technology. We're going to show it off to everyone. We are not, our belief is that our lead in the industry will be determined by our pace of innovation, right? And so we're not the group that's trying to necessarily like block everybody out by patenting every single little thing. What wins is the pace of innovation, right? It's why Tesla has done so well. It's why Elon keeps winning. He just keeps innovating. He unveils one product and that we all go crazy over, but that product has been in the works for years. There's another product that's already been in the works now that we're going to be blown away with, you know, years from now. That's our view of this, right? So we want to show off the products that we have. We're very confident in the technology. And so we will show that off here as soon as this transaction is closed. We will put it out there publicly.
Awesome. So I'm going to turn it back to Spencer. It looks like we've got lots of chat questions to get to.
Yeah.
So let's try to knock as many of those down as we can before we let you go, Adam.
Yeah, quickly, because we've had Adam on for a half hour, and this is great, but I don't want to take up too much of his time. All right. Well, let's start with this. Do you plan to get a lot of questions about first responders? Do you plan to sell these vehicles to first responders?
Yeah, that's a really important one. And so the answer to that is yes. So, the DoD is actually a really interesting group, and I think an important one in the development of this technology, not for kinetic use cases, for non-kinetic use cases, meaning for, think about things like golden hour vehicles that can be built that can help, you know, save a soldier's life. If you get something like a dramatic increase in odds that you can save a soldier's life, if you can remove them from harm's way within an hour, really important use case. Things like rescue vehicles, right? Really important vehicles. So, if you look at a lot of helicopters, I live, near like the Stanford, hospital, and I hear the helicopters flying over, right? First of all, with these vehicles, you wouldn't hear them. It wouldn't be disruptive, but every hospital that has a helicopter, certainly this would be a great use case for them. And so I think emergency services is a really great use case for it, something we're definitely very excited about. My guess is that the DoD will actually help facilitate that. And in the sense that the DoD wants the next great aerospace company to be built right here in America. And they're being very helpful, really helpful. They're providing, guidance, flight test, kind of whatever resources they can to help not just Archer, the whole community, which I think is really important. And so it's really geared around that. So if you think about, some of these bigger helicopters, a bigger helicopter can cost you on upwards of $5,000 to $10,000 per hour to operate, right? So super expensive. These vehicles, electric vehicles, will certainly not cost that. And so I think there's a big use case here. Emergency services, disaster relief, golden hour vehicles, even supply chain logistics. So we've talked to some groups about things like dropping in like firefighting equipment, like bringing things like that quickly to folks. Where, again, helicopters, very expensive, hard to maintain. What if you had a fleet of these vehicles that could bring equipment like that to disasters really fast, right? It's now much more affordable to do that. It's not like a helicopter's reserved for the rich anymore. This is now can be available to the masses as these vehicles are just much less expensive.
Yep. And then also a bunch of questions about safety, as I'm sure you would expect. So one question: how many of the 12 motors can fail and still allow for a safe landing?
So we can lose 2 of our rotors. So how about this? There's 12 rotors, 6 on the leading edge, 6 on the trailing edge. Okay. We have 6 independent battery packs where we can lose 2 for sure. 2 rotors can go for sure. And then different combinations we can also lose where the vehicle can fly safely. So based on those combinations, you can lose 3, rotors, potentially even 4. And so the vehicle is also, built with a big wing. It is designed to glide down and land, conventionally. So you do get the benefits there. Like a helicopter just has to try to auto rotate, right? And so they can't glide down. And so, we have 0 critical parts in these aircraft. So if you lost, so think about this, 6 independent battery packs, 12 rotors. Let's say you had a bird strike, we lost a rotor, the passengers wouldn't even know. Like it would fly totally. Let's say flock of birds, you lost multiple rotors, right? Which, by the way, the propellers are designed for bird strike, right? So the odds of you losing them are still pretty low. And so, but let's say it did happen, right? You can lose multiple rotors. You can lose battery pack because they're independent battery packs. And then worst case, you can always glide. Now, we don't get benefit in the certification process that you can glide from the wing. So you still have that. That doesn't go into the one, certified to 1 in a billion, that 10 to the -9 level. But just to give you a sense, think about like a helicopter, which just has these hundreds of critical parts.
And then the last one here is really who is flying these, and what are the requirements, the certifications that you need to operate one of these vehicles?
Yeah, so we'll certify under typical airplane, type certification levels. But the vehicles will be flown by pilots. But this is actually an interesting conversation here. So it's one of the reasons that United actually was very interested. So United wants to help increase their funnel for new pilots. They also want to add diversity to the pilots that they bring in too. Right now, the main source of pilots is the military, right? And you kind of get what you get. You can't really influence the funnel. And so this is actually an attractive new area for them, an attractive new airplane that will be able to attract new pilots to the industry. For one, you can sleep in your own bed at night. You're not taking a plane, flying, in 4 days a week, you're on the road, right? These are local vehicles, so you'll be able to do that. They will be fairly simple vehicles to fly, and they will be vehicles that will also, the hours that you get flying these vehicles will count towards the hours that you need to fly the larger aircraft, where you can make more money as a pilot as your career progresses. So there's actually really nice synergies here for the airlines to operate these vehicles as it relates to tactical issues that they're trying to solve too. It's not just about, there obviously is the large area of urban air mobility, huge new sector. You also get decarbonization. You also get tactical things like defrictionizing travel for United's passengers. And then you also get some of these other tactical things like solving their pilot issues, right? So really multiple layered benefits, but it is not going to require some crazy special thing that no one has to do. It's actually a fairly simple airplane to fly that I think people would enjoy flying. And so we're excited about that.
Adam Goldstein has been on with us. He's the co-founder of Archer. They're merging with Atlas Crest. The ticker is ACIC. Adam, you gave some extremely detailed answers. Thanks so much for the time. We kept you a very long time, but it was well worth it. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We'll be in touch. We're going to keep following the story, and we'll have you on again.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Adam. Look forward
Thanks.
to checking out that vehicle from you.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. All right.